As Flesh and Blood communities adapt to include a growing player base as well as the addition of more formats, I believe it is especially important to consider everyone's role in the sustaining of a healthy community. Today, I'm going to share a cautionary tale from a few years ago about the relatively quick demise of a once thriving LGS community from another game. One of the takeaways I had from that unfortunate experience was the importance of engaging with everyone in the community prior to the implementation of change, and the importance of community members giving positive feedback to the LGS and the community leaders, lest something be changed that was working well. Change now is, of course, inevitable and necessary, but how we collectively approach and manage that change is an important part of a healthy LGS community. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, Flesh and Blood folks. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. Thanks for tuning in once again. It has been a spell. I was out for a long little vacation, much needed, but you guys know how it is, right? Or with how busy we are, our routines are pretty packed, and when you go out of town, you kind of have to solve for the area under the curve, if you know what I mean, when you get back and basically dig yourself out of a hole. But it is what it is, and we are here, and I'm excited. And again, thank you guys for tuning in. You guys freaking rock. So tonight, I want to tell a story. Now, no, it's not about Flesh and Blood, but it's relevant. Trust me. So we are sponsored here by our good friends over at FabDB. You guys know them. You guys love them. They've got everything you need Flesh and Blood related on the web, short of free paper cards. Of course, we have collection management, deck building. That's what I use them for the most. All sorts of other features you can unlock when you're over there. Check them out. And thank you to FabDB for everything you do, not only for us, but for the community. So thanks, FabDB. All right, so tonight what I want to do, I want to tell a little story and then put it in context of basically, learning from mistakes, right? And how we can apply that because there's a lot of change going on, right? We've added Commoner in Flesh and Blood, of course, and everything, but in Flesh and Blood, we've added Commoner, and we're going to, in the near future, be adding, narrative campaigns or whatever that may be. However that turns out in PvE, that's a while away. But, that stores are going to be looking to adapt, to change, to grow their player base. That's what we all want. So how do we do that? How do we do that in a way that doesn't ruin how do we make it better without ruining the good, right? That's really the thesis statement, I guess, for tonight. So, okay, story time, and I gotta have a beer for this one, and I may get passionate about it because it was rough, right? So this was back in the days when we were playing Star Wars Destiny. It was a relatively new and thriving game at that time, right? It's no surprise if a dying game dies, but this was a thriving game at the time. So what had happened is the store was responsible for running tournaments. They did it every Saturday, weekly, except for Magic pre-release weekends and stuff like that, which makes sense, perfect sense. But they ran it every week, and we had about a 20-person player base, of which we'd get, that's the way things work. You get roughly 60 to 75% of that. So we had a good number of people showing up, and we played the same format every weekend because there was only one format at the time, other than limited, right? So what basically happened was we were a thriving community, and we had people coming, and this one new individual came, and he wanted to play limited. Now, one thing to put into context, which is great, right? But one thing you need to put into context about Star Wars Destiny is Fantasy Flight Games was unable to manage their release schedule. It was sometimes 6 or more months in between product releases. So a lot of people had what they needed or what they wanted. And, asking someone to pay $6 for a standard tournament versus asking someone to pay for a limited, right, a draft type tournament is a big ask. And the community at large was not on board at that particular time, right? If it had been after a set release or something, it might have been a different story. But at the time that this individual came in, the community was not on board with playing limited. And he was, a good customer for the store, which is great. But he got in the store's ear, and every time he came in, it was, hey, the Star Wars community wants draft. The Star Wars community wants draft, and so on, and maybe phone calls and so on, right? So by the time you make the rounds of all the employees, everyone's telling the managers, well, this is what the community wants. So the store responded to the feedback they were getting, right? The store responded and they changed their, for the next month, they put 50% was limited. Well, what happened was the community didn't want that, so the community didn't show up to those, and the tournaments didn't fire. So now you have a problem, right, where the store is committing event space, which is valuable space, to not making money on it. And to them, it looks like the Star Wars Destiny community, or the community at large, was not supporting them. And the community felt unsupported because they were not running the events that they wanted. And basically, the community stopped buying from the store because there were other places in town that were even in brick and mortar selling it cheaper, right? And you can see where this goes, right? Basically, everybody started that, the store got mad that they weren't getting supported by the players, so they didn't want to commit the event space. The players weren't feeling supported, so they weren't buying from the store anymore. And you can see where it went from there, right? So again, we don't need to go through the details, not calling out any names or any stores or anything. I mean, obviously, if anybody's around from that, you know what I'm talking about. But that is what happened, right? And I'm not exaggerating that. That is what happened, right? One person got in, and this single person drove. And it's funny, right? When we hear, well, this single person is at fault for the death of our community, usually we think a toxic player. Usually you think, some big smelly dude who's just being rude and nobody wants to play with. And certainly that can be an issue. But usually that's more manageable. Like usually someone will take them outside and be like, hey, clean it up. Or maybe the store will ban them or whatever it may come to, right? But that is, ironically, right, that is actually more manageable. Whereas in this case, what was happening, the store was trying to do what they perceived as the right thing, and it backfired on them. And then, of course, we've all been there, especially as tournament organizers, they didn't want to change their schedule, right? Once they changed it and they got the negative feedback of, hey, we don't want this, they were like, well, we don't want to change our schedule because it's already published. I do respect that. I understand that. I think in this case, it was a mistake, but it's the way it goes. So anyway, that's the story. So, as we go through this, and yes, we're doing this PTI style, as you can already see, the store was at fault because the store, everybody, I want to be clear here, everybody shared fault, right? But the store was at fault because they were not soliciting feedback of the community. They were not asking anyone, they were waiting to be told. And again, you get tired of that, which is, yes, the world we live in, because that's how the internet works, right? But they got tired of the picking and they just changed, and it didn't work for them. Now, this selfish player was also at fault because, let's be honest, right? When we use the word bully these days, it still has connotations to the playground bully who pushes your face in the dirt or gives you a swirly or whatever it may be, right? But there are many types of bullies, especially in social media, but this was a great example. This guy got what he wanted by bullying his way in, right? And that is toxic, right? That is a toxic and horrible, awful thing to do. Right, so this guy was obviously at fault because he didn't care what anybody else wanted. He didn't care what was better for the community. He just wanted what he wanted, and he wanted it now. But the takeaway from all of this, or what I hope to be the takeaway from all of this, is the community was also at fault. And not because they stopped buying from the store, not because they stopped going to events. I don't expect anybody to go and pay money for something you don't want to do. I don't expect anybody to, if you're not feeling supported, that extra $10 to $15 that we are all willing to commit to our LGS, if you're not feeling it's worth it, I don't blame you from buying online or buying from another store or whatever it may be, right? So that is not where the community is at fault. Where the community is at fault, and this is the retrospective part of it, is we did not give the store positive feedback before the change happened that what was happening we liked, right? Now, the argument can be made that we were voting with our dollars, voting with our attendance of coming, and that is true. But in the store's defense, they had no way to know that we would stop coming when the format changed. But again, back to two above, they could have asked, right? So you can see, hopefully I've made, through this story, hopefully I've made it clear how everybody in the community absolutely plays a role. And, again, back to, you can relate it to everything we see these days. It's been this way for a long time. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? You can have 1% of the population upset about something, and they can really drive the narrative because the other 50% doesn't care enough to say anything. The other 49% is afraid to say anything lest they be called horrible or whatever. And, you know, you can apply that to, I mean, it's just human nature. It's the way that our society, the way Western society works, right? Or Southern society is. You guys know what I mean in terms of Western society, right? So the squeaky wheel does get the grease, and you can very much drive, and you can very much drive change being a vocal minority, right? That is an absolute truth of our world. And that is why it's very important for this next bullet here. That's important for not just the store, but for the community leaders at large to solicit feedback. And, you know, I want to give an example. We've talked about this a bit on here, but we recently changed the Armory events at Gongai. We used to charge $5, and we would just do Armory kit pricing. So it was nice and cheap, but it was just the free pricing and nothing else. And recently, what I wanted to do to be more player friendly, because I knew a lot of changes were coming, a lot of the group was growing, and we were having a lot of people not getting priced out proportionately, right, to how it was working, right? Once you get above 8, people are leaving without stuff. So I wanted to change to a $10 entry where players were guaranteed 2 packs. So as part of your $10 entry, everybody gets 2 packs. That lets the store move a little product at margin. They get a little extra on top of that. And then we still have the Armory prizes on top of that for the people that prize out. I ran that past the store. They said, okay, that sounds good to us. But before we finalized it, we went and we asked the player base. And that was, you know, the player base was very much on board, you know, because you want to make sure. It's like, hey, if we raise the price, are you going to be mad that it's $5 more, right? Because some players may not care about the 2 packs. The majority of the new player community is going to, what I suspected was going to support that. But it could have gone either way, right? If I'd walked out there and, you know, 6 out of 8 of our regulars said, hell no, I wouldn't have done it, right? And I thought it was a positive change. It ended up being, but just because I believed it didn't mean that was the case, right? And, you know, to sum this up, I suppose the positive feedback, my players are not my players, but the players in the Gongai community and you know, the Portland community at large, which is who I interact with on a daily basis from an organization standpoint, they really do a very good job giving positive feedback and making me as a tournament organizer and making, you know, they give Gongai positive feedback of, like, we really like playing here. It's a nice play space. I mean, whatever it may be, they give me positive feedback and they make me feel valued, even when they're kicking my teeth in, right? And it has created a very positive atmosphere just because they go out of their way to give that, right? And they don't have to do that. But if we were not getting that, maybe we'd be like, man, people are not happy. Let's change something. And then you have an upset community, right? So, you know, to sum it up here, sum up my lecture, right? Community really is a partnership, right? These gaming communities are a partnership, not just for everyone being nice to each other. Yes, that's important. Not be clear, I'm not dismissing that at all. It's the most important part. Be nice, respect each other, but also make sure that you're respecting the relationship itself, right? And hopefully I don't sound too much like a marriage counselor or something right now. I mean, I don't know, right? But you have to respect the relationship itself, right? You can't expect the store to do something unreasonable for the store. You can't expect players to just do whatever, right? And you know, it can be small stuff too, like not setting yourself up for failure, right? I generally, as a rule, I like to cancel, I mean, I don't like to, but I generally cancel tournaments or I cancel events on weekends where we know that something else is big is happening, or on a holiday weekend, right? If we know that, you know, what good is it to have a 4-person tournament and distribute your player base when you could just cancel and then have everybody excited to show up the next week, right? And thus more motivated. And, you know, it's a little harder during the summer, or, you know, the off months. You guys get that. But you understand my point, right? You have to respect the community, set them up for success, and I believe it will really go from there. So anyway, that's really my takeaway. Thanks for listening to my ramblings. I mean, we shouted out Gongai a couple times. I really do want to give them a huge shout out here. They are a great LGS. If you are looking at your Uprising pre-orders and you want to support an LGS and you don't have one, You can use them, code Commando10 at checkout. I don't get anything from that. It just helps support them and keep my fab community going. And thank you. That's appreciated. I appreciate it. And also shout out to my buddy at Fab Foundry, Travis. He also runs an LGS on the other side of town. He also does a great job. Not arguably, definitely does a better job than me as a TO. I think I'm good, but he's great. Does a great job. You can get singles from him, and if you do use the link below when you check out, when you're getting those Uprising singles here in a few weeks, I get a little kickback from that, and that's appreciated. So anyway, folks, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I was really excited to be able to finally get this one together. It's something I was able to work on vacation and finally just get my thoughts together, get the graphics together, and I really appreciate you sitting down and having a chat. I'd love to hear what you think. What has gone well for your communities? What has not gone well for your communities? Help us all learn and get the conversation going. Let me know below. And if nothing else, folks, go Commando.